Deep in the heart of Russia's Kaliningrad region, there's a place where the trees don't grow the way they should. Instead of stretching straight toward the sky, their trunks twist and spiral in impossible shapes, as if frozen mid-dance. This is the dancing forest, a natural mystery that has baffled scientists, inspired legends, and left visitors wondering if they've stepped into a world where the rules of nature no longer apply. Imagine walking through a grove where every tree seems alive with movement, their contorted forms telling stories we can't quite decipher. What could cause such a strange phenomenon? Some say it's the work of unseen forces, others blame the soil, and a few whisper about ancient curses. But no one knows for sure. For centuries, these twisted trees have been the subject of wild speculation. Locals tell tales of spirits that bend the forest to their will, of a land so charged with energy that it warps the very wood. Scientists, meanwhile, have tested the soil, studied the wind patterns, and even examined the trees' DNA, yet the mystery remains unsolved. The dancing forest defies logic, standing as one of those rare places on Earth where nature seems to play by its own rules. And that's exactly what makes it so fascinating. Whether it's supernatural forces, hidden geological quirks, or something even stranger, this forest challenges everything we think we know about how the natural world works. Today, we're stepping into the enigma of the dancing forests. We'll explore the eerie beauty of these twisted trees, dig into the wildest theories behind their shapes, and separate fact from folklore. Along the way, you'll hear from those who have witnessed the forest's strangeness firsthand, and maybe even decide for yourself what's really causing these trees to dance. So if you've ever wondered about the world's unsolved mysteries, the ones that science can't quite crack, you're in the right place. Because by the end of this, you might just see nature and its secrets in a whole new light. The dancing forest sprawls across the Curonian Spit, a slender strip of land nestled between the Baltic Sea and the Curonian Lagoon in Russia's westernmost enclave, Kaliningrad. This isolated stretch of shifting sand dunes and pine groves has long been a place of eerie beauty, where the wind whispers secrets through the trees, especially here where the trunks twist into unnatural spirals, loops, and even perfect rings. Unlike the rigid, skyward pines of neighboring forests, these trees look as though an invisible hand sculpted them mid-growth. The most striking cluster, known locally as the Drunken Forest, lies near the tiny settlement of Rybaki, where visitors have reported feeling an uncanny quietness, as if the very air holds its breath. Modern scientists first documented the phenomenon in the 1960s, though locals had known of the twisted groves for generations. Early Soviet researchers initially dismissed the odd shapes as a fluke of harsh coastal winds or unstable sand beneath the roots. But when they measured the trees, the patterns defied simple explanation. Some spirals turned clockwise, others counterclockwise, sometimes within feet of each other, with no clear environmental trigger. Even stranger, the distortions didn't appear until the trees were several years old, as if something in the ground waited to seize them. Long before scientists arrived, though, the forest had already etched itself into regional folklore. German settlers in the 1800s spoke of a Hexenwald, or witch's forest, where the trees bent to avoid the touch of vengeful spirits. Fishermen crossing the spit at night claimed the contorted trunks moved when no one was watching. And during World War II, occupying soldiers whispered that the grove was a cursed place. Some refused to enter it altogether. Today, guides recount these old stories with a mix of amusement and unease, pointing out trees that resemble serpents, dancers, or even frozen screams. What makes the dancing forest so unsettling isn't just the trees themselves, but the way they disrupt our expectations of how nature behaves. In a world where forests follow rules, roots dig down, trunks reach up, this place feels like a glitch. Yet for all the myths, one thing is certain: whether the cause is geological, biological, or something beyond our understanding, this patch of twisted pines refuses to surrender its secrets. When scientists first examined the dancing forest, their logical starting point was the environment itself. After all, trees don't twist into spirals without a reason, or so we assume. The most straightforward explanation points to the relentless coastal winds that whip across the Curonian Spit. This narrow stretch of land acts like a funnel, channeling strong gusts from the Baltic Sea with enough force to bend young, flexible trunks over time. In other regions, we've seen trees grow at angles due to persistent winds, forming so-called flag trees where branches only grow on the sheltered side. But here's the problem: wind alone can't account for the forest's most bizarre shapes. While it might explain slight leans or curves, the dancing forest features trees coiled into perfect rings, tight corkscrews, and even knots patterns that defy the chaotic push and pull of wind alone. Then there's the soil. The Curonian Spit is essentially a massive sand dune, unstable and ever-shifting. Some researchers theorized that the tree's roots, struggling to anchor in such loose ground, could cause the trunks to wobble as they grow, leading to distortions. Others suggested that the sand's movement might expose or bury sections of the trunks at critical growth stages, forcing them to contort. But again, this doesn't quite fit. If unstable soil were the culprit, we'd expect the distortions to be random, not clustered in specific areas or displaying such precise, repetitive patterns. Even more puzzling, nearby trees in identical soil conditions grow straight, while their neighbors spiral wildly. The wind and soil theory hits another snore when you consider the timeline. These trees don't start out twisted, they grow normally for the first 5 to 10 years before suddenly warping. If wind or soil were the primary causes, the distortions would appear much earlier, shaping the trees from seedlinghood. Instead, something seems to trigger the bending later, as if the forest switches from ordinary to uncanny midway through its life. Perhaps the most damning evidence against the environmental explanation comes from the trees themselves. Studies of their growth rings reveal something astonishing. The twisting isn't constant. Some years the trees grow straight, others they veer sharply. Wind and soil don't work in sporadic bursts, they're consistent forces. So why would their effects come and go? This inconsistency has led some scientists to suspect a hidden variable, something beyond the obvious natural causes. Maybe it's a combination of factors, or maybe we're missing a piece of the puzzle entirely. For now, the dancing forest keeps its secrets. The wind and soil theories provide a starting point, but like the twisted trunks themselves, the truth seems to bend just out of reach. One of the most intriguing scientific theories about the dancing forest points to something invisible yet powerful: magnetic fields. Imagine the ground beneath these trees humming with an unseen energy, subtly tugging at their growth over time. Researchers have long wondered whether geomagnetic anomalies in the Kaliningrad region could be warping the trees in ways we can't easily perceive. Unlike wind or soil, which leave visible marks, magnetism works in silence, bending not just metal but possibly even the very cells inside these pines. Studies measuring the area's magnetic fields have revealed unusual fluctuations, particularly around the most twisted sections of the forest. Some scientists speculate that these irregularities might interfere with the tree's internal guidance systems. Just as migrating birds navigate using Earth's magnetic field, plants, especially young saplings, are known to respond to subtle geomagnetic cues during growth. If the LOCAL Chinese letter, a term scientists use for magnetic fields, were unusually strong or chaotic, it could theoretically scramble those signals, causing the trunks to spiral erratically as they struggle to orient themselves. In the late 1990s, a team of biologists and geophysicists conducted a series of experiments, mapping the forest's magnetic activity alongside the tree's distortions. They found a curious pattern: the most severe twists often aligned with pockets of heightened magnetic irregularity. But here's where the theory hits a snag. While the correlation exists, no one has been able to prove causation. Other forests with similar magnetic quirks don't exhibit this level of distortion, and lab experiments exposing saplings to a RTIFICIL Chinese letter H of VE yet to replicate the dancing forest's elaborate spirals. Skeptics argue that if magnetism were the primary culprit, the twists would follow a more uniform direction, aligning with the pull of the anomalies. Instead, the trees seem to contort in defiance of any consistent force, some clockwise, others counterclockwise, as if caught in a silent argument with the ground itself. Even supporters of the theory admit that magnetism alone can't explain the full scope of the phenomenon. It might be one ingredient in a much stranger recipe, working alongside wind, soil instability, or even biological factors we haven't uncovered yet. What keeps this idea alive, though, is the sheer unpredictability of the forest. Magnetic fields shift over time, which could explain why some trees grow straight for years before suddenly bending. It's as if something beneath the sand occasionally wakes up, tugging the trees into shapes that linger long after the invisible force retreats. Until we can peer deeper into this hidden dance between earth and wood, the theory remains as elusive and as tantalizing as the forest itself. Could something as small as a fungus or parasite be behind the dancing forest's twisted spectacle? Scientists have long considered the possibility that microscopic invaders might be hijacking these trees, forcing them into their strange shapes. After all, nature is full of examples where tiny organisms manipulate their hosts in bizarre ways. Take the zombie ant fungus, which infects insects and compels them to climb vegetation before dying, or the parasitic wasp that turns caterpillars into helpless bodyguards for its young. If these creatures can bend animals to their will, why not trees? One leading suspect is a group of pathogens known as phytoplasmas, bacteria-like organisms that infect plants and alter their growth patterns. In Japan, phytoplasmas cause a condition called witch's broom, where tree branches grow in dense, tangled clusters instead of spreading normally. Similar infections elsewhere lead to twisted stems and unnatural leaf formations. These microbes interfere with the plant's hormones, essentially reprogramming its development. Could something similar be at work in the dancing forest? Some researchers have found faint traces of phytoplasma DNA in the twisted pines, but the evidence isn't conclusive. Unlike typical infections, the distortions here are strikingly uniform, almost artistic in their precision, rather than the chaotic mess usually left by pathogens. Then there's the fungi theory. Certain species, like the aptly named twist fungus, are known to warp wood as they colonize it. Sailors centuries ago dreaded this organism because it could contort ship timbers into useless curves. In the Netherlands, a fungal infection once caused an entire orchard of pear trees to spiral unnaturally. But again, the dancing forest presents a puzzle. Most fungal distortions are irregular and accompanied by visible decay, yet these Russian pines show no signs of rot or weakness, just elegant, almost deliberate spirals. The biggest hurdle for the pathogen theory is consistency. If microbes or fungi were the culprits, we'd expect the distortions to spread contagiously, with nearby trees gradually catching the infection. Instead, the dancing forest's twists appear in isolated clusters, with healthy trees growing mere feet away from contorted ones. Even more baffling, the patterns repeat in ways that seem almost intentional, like a grove of trees all deciding to dance the same steps. Pathogens don't usually work with such symmetry. Perhaps the answer lies in a combination of factors: a rare strain of fungus interacting with unique soil conditions, or a phytoplasma that behaves differently in the Baltic climate. Or maybe we're still missing a piece of the puzzle. Whatever the case, the dancing forest reminds us that even the smallest forces in nature can produce wonders and mysteries that defy easy explanation. In an attempt to crack the code of the dancing forest, scientists devised a bold experiment, one that would either bring them closer to the truth or plunge the mystery even deeper. They planted rows of young pine saplings in the heart of the twisted grove, carefully documenting their growth over the years. The goal was simple. If environmental factors like wind or soil were to blame, the new trees should mimic the distortions of their older counterparts. But what unfolded was anything but predictable. For the first few years, the saplings grew as expected, straight, healthy, and utterly ordinary. Then, almost as if a switch had flipped, some of them began to spiral. Not randomly, but in near-perfect replication of the older tree's contortions. Tight corkscrews, loops, even those eerie ring shapes emerged, as though the forest had passed on some silent instruction. The strangest part, these distortions appeared in patches, with some saplings remaining straight while their immediate neighbors twisted into mirror images of the decades-old pines around them. This outcome threw a wrench into nearly every existing theory. If wind were the cause, why would only select trees bend, often sheltered by taller, twisted ones? If the soil was unstable, why did some saplings anchor firmly while others spiraled just inches away? Even the pathogen theory stumbled. How could an infection target specific trees with such surgical precision, leaving others untouched? The experiment's most unsettling implication was that whatever forces shaped this forest weren't just historical. They were still active, still twisting new trees in real time. Researchers also noted something curious about the timing. The saplings didn't distort gradually, they seemed to decide to bend suddenly, often during a single growing season. This mirrored the older trees' growth rings, which showed abrupt shifts in direction. It was as though the forest had a rhythm, a hidden cycle that prompted these changes at specific intervals. Some scientists wondered if underground water shifts or geomagnetic pulses could trigger the bends, but no one could say for sure. The experiment's most haunting detail, though, was the precision of the mimicry. Saplings didn't just twist, they echoed the exact patterns of the trees around them, like apprentices copying a master's dance. This suggested an almost intelligent communication between the pines, whether through root networks, airborne signals, or something we haven't yet imagined. Ultimately, the study raised more questions than answers. If science can't explain why new trees twist in lockstep with the old, what does that say about our understanding of nature itself? The dancing forest, it seems, isn't just a relic of the past. It's alive, still shaping itself in ways that defy logic, and inviting us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about the silent, stubborn will of trees. Long before scientists arrived with their instruments and theories, the dancing forest was already alive in the stories of those who lived near it. Generations of locals have woven tales so vivid, they cling to the twisted pines like mist over the dunes. One of the oldest legends claims this was once sacred ground for pagan tribes, a place where the veil between worlds grew thin. They say the trees don't just twist, they writhe, frozen in motion as they try to escape something unseen stirring beneath the sand. According to the lore, the forest marks a doorway, and those who walk its paths at dusk might catch whispers from the other side, voices tangled in the branches like old echoes. Another story, passed down from German settlers, speaks of a witch who cursed the land centuries ago. Betrayed by her lover, she knelt in the sand and vowed that no living thing would grow upright again. As her tears hit the earth, the young trees around her began to coil, their trunks mirroring the spirals of her grief. To this day, guides point out a particularly gnarled pine rumored to be the witch's final resting place, its roots knotted around something that glints oddly in the moonlight. Fishermen still avoid the shore nearby, muttering about lights that flicker among the trees when no one should be there. Then there's the Soviet-era myth, born during Kaliningrad's years as a closed military zone. Soldiers stationed near the spit swapped rumors about secret experiments, government scientists testing strange energies that warped living wood. Some claim to have seen figures in hazmat suits taking samples under cover of darkness, while others insisted the trees themselves were listening devices, their spirals acting as antennas to capture foreign radio signals. Though these Cold War stories lack proof, they reveal how every era projects its fears onto the forest, dressing the unknown in the clothing of the times. What unites these tales isn't just their eeriness, but their shared purpose to make sense of something beyond understanding. When faced with nature's defiance, we reach for stories like torches in the dark, witchcraft, portals, hidden technologies. The dancing forest resists neat explanations, so folklore bends to fill the gaps, morphing with each generation. Today, some visitors leave ribbons tied to the twisted branches, a modern twist on ancient votive offerings. Others claim their compasses spin wildly in certain spots, or that their cameras malfunction among the oldest trees. Perhaps the most telling detail lies in what these stories omit. No legend describes the forest as malevolent, only strange, sorrowful, or mysteriously alive. Even the witch's curse carries a thread of tragedy rather than malice. It's as if the human mind, confronted with such impossible beauty, can't help but respond with awe rather than fear. After all, a forest that dances is more than a puzzle. It's a mirror, reflecting back our endless hunger for wonder. Among the darkest theories surrounding the dancing forest is the claim that Nazi scientists deliberately warped these trees during World War II. As the German military occupied the Curonian Spit in the 1940s, rumors persist that they used the isolated pine groves as a testing ground for bizarre experiments. Some say the Nazis injected chemicals into the soil or exposed young saplings to electromagnetic fields, attempting to manipulate their growth for unknown purposes. Others whisper about occult rituals, suggesting the twisted shapes were meant to harness supernatural energies, an idea fueled by the regime's well-documented fascination with esoteric symbolism. The theory gained traction decades later when Soviet investigators uncovered abandoned German research stations near the forest. Documents referenced vague biological trials, though specifics were heavily redacted. Conspiracy theorists point to the Nazis' known interest in genetic manipulation and their obsession with controlling nature, citing projects like the Anomalies' quest for mythical plants. Could the dancing forest have been another twisted experiment, one that outlasted the war itself? Historians, however, dismantle these claims piece by piece. First, the tree's distortions predate the Nazi occupation by decades. Botanical records show the twisted pines were already documented in the late 1800s. Second, no surviving German records mention tree manipulation, despite meticulous documentation of other wartime experiments. The so-called biological trials likely referred to mundane soil studies for camouflage purposes, not sinister arboreal tampering. The most damning evidence against the Nazi theory lies in the trees themselves. Their growth rings reveal that the spiraling occurred in irregular intervals long before and after the war, following no timeline that aligns with military activity. If Nazi scientists had somehow triggered the distortions, why would the effects be so inconsistent? And why would nearby forests subjected to identical wartime conditions remain untouched? Yet the legend persists, partly because it taps into our collective unease about the era's horrors. The idea that the Nazis left behind a living, growing monument to their madness is chilling, but nature's mysteries rarely bow to human narratives. The truth of the dancing forest refuses to be pinned to any one history, no matter how dramatic. Instead, it stands as a reminder that some enigmas defy even the darkest of explanations. Of all the theories swirling around the dancing forest, none sparks the imagination quite like the idea that something, or someone, not of this world might be responsible. For decades, visitors and researchers alike have reported strange lights hovering above the twisted pines, glowing orbs that dart between the trees with no apparent source. Some claim these lights pulse in rhythmic patterns as if communicating, while others insist they vanish the moment they're spotted, leaving behind only an eerie silence. Could these unexplained sightings be connected to the forest's unnatural shapes? Believers in extraterrestrial influence argue that the precision of the spirals suggests an intelligence behind them, something beyond wind, soil, or even magnetic fields. Theories range from the plausible to the outright fantastical. One hypothesis suggests that underground UFO bases beneath the Curonian spit emit energy fields that warp the trees over time, possibly as a side effect of advanced propulsion systems. Others propose that the forest acts as a kind of alien message board, with the twisted trunks forming symbols or coordinates meant to be read from above. Skeptics, of course, dismiss these ideas as pure speculation, pointing out that light anomalies can often be explained by atmospheric conditions or even fireflies. But the persistence of these reports, spanning generations and countless eyewitnesses, keeps the debate alive. A particularly chilling account comes from a group of hikers in the late 1980s who swore they saw a cluster of slender, silver figures moving silently among the trees at dawn. By the time they reached the spot, the figures were gone, but the bark on several pines bore unusual scorch marks, as if seared by intense heat. Similar stories echo through local lore, with Cold War-era border guards logging bizarre radar blips over the forest, and modern drone pilots complaining of sudden signal losses when flying too close to the most twisted groves. The UFO angle gains traction when you consider other global anomalies. In Romania, the Hoia-Baciu forest, dubbed the Bermuda Triangle of Transylvania, features similarly twisted trees alongside frequent reports of apparitions and unexplained lights. In Japan, the Aokigahara forest's warped sections are often linked to paranormal activity. These parallels raise a tantalizing question: could certain landscapes act as natural hotspots for phenomena we don't yet understand? Yet for all the intrigue, hard evidence remains elusive. No soil samples have revealed alien metals, no tree cores contain exotic isotopes. The lights, while widely reported, have never been captured clearly on film. And if extraterrestrials were shaping the forest, why only here? Why not in every patch of vulnerable saplings across the planet? The lack of answers doesn't dampen the mystery, it deepens it. Because in the absence of proof, the dancing forest becomes a canvas for our grandest questions about the universe. Whether the truth lies in the stars or the soil, one thing's certain: this place refuses to fit neatly into any earthly explanation. The dancing forest isn't alone in its defiance of nature's rules around the world. Pockets of landscape whisper similar mysteries. Take Poland's Crooked Forest, where 400 pine trees near Gryfino bend sharply at their bases, forming perfect 90-degree hooks before growing straight upward. Like the Russian grove, these trees began normally before suddenly warping, but there's a key difference. Every trunk in the Crooked Forest curves northward, as if pulled by an invisible tide, while the dancing forest spirals twist in chaotic harmony. Some theorize Nazi tanks flattened the Polish saplings during World War II, and they later curved skyward in recovery, but no historical records confirm this. Others suggest gravitational anomalies or unique grafting techniques lost to time. What makes the dancing forest stranger is its variability. No two trees contort identically, as if each responded to a different unheard command. Then there's Nevada's Gravity Hill, where cars appear to roll uphill against all laws of physics. Like the magnetic theories surrounding Kaliningrad's trees, this optical illusion plays tricks with perception. What seems like a supernatural slope is actually a carefully camouflaged downhill. But while Gravity Hill's secret lies in clever topography, the dancing forest resists such tidy explanations. Its distortions can't be chalked up to simple perspective tricks. You can touch the spirals, trace their impossible paths with your fingers. In Romania's Hoia-Baciu forest, dead trees stand leafless beside thriving ones, while compasses spin uncontrollably, phenomena locals attribute to portals to other dimensions. Unlike the dancing forest's silent elegance, Hoia-Baciu crackles with unease. Visitors report nausea, burns, and the eerie sensation of being watched. Both forests feature twisted trees, but where Hoia-Baciu feels hostile, Russia's grove hums with cryptic artistry. Perhaps the closest cousin lies in Japan's Aokigahara, where volcanic rock forces roots to snake across the surface, creating gnarled, spider-like forms. But while geology explains Aokigahara's chaos, the dancing forest's precision, those perfect rings and mathematically precise spirals, hints at something beyond erosion or tough terrain. From Poland's uniform curves to Romania's eerie dead zones, these sites share one thread. They challenge our assumptions about how the world works, but the dancing forest stands apart in its refusal to fit any mold, not quite optical illusion, not fully geological quirk, and too symmetrical for random chance. It exists in a category of its own, a living puzzle that continues to grow stranger with each passing season. Among the many forces shaping our world, gravity is the quietest and most constant, except perhaps in places like the dancing forest. Could subtle gravitational anomalies explain why these trees grow in defiance of all logic? At first glance, the idea seems far-fetched. Gravity, after all, is what makes roots dig downward and trunks stretch skyward. But what if the pull of the Earth isn't uniform here? Some researchers speculate that hidden density variations beneath the Curonian spit, pockets of heavy minerals or even voids, might create localized gravitational tugs, warping the tree's growth over time. Plants are exquisitely sensitive to gravity. Even in a dark room, a seedling will bend toward the Earth's pull, guided by microscopic starch grains in its cells that act like tiny plumb lines. Disrupt that system, say, by tilting the plant or altering the gravitational field, and the growth goes haywire. Astronauts have seen this firsthand aboard the International Space Station, where seedlings in microgravity spiral aimlessly, unsure which way is up. On Earth, experiments with centrifuges show that plants subjected to uneven gravity can develop curves and loops, mimicking some of the dancing forest shapes. So why hasn't this theory gained more traction? For starters, no measurable gravitational anomalies have been detected in the area, at least none strong enough to override the Earth's dominant pull. The instruments we use to map gravity's subtle variations, like gravimeters, haven't flagged anything unusual in Kaliningrad. Then there's the problem of scale. Gravitational shifts powerful enough to bend trees would likely affect other things too: water flow, soil compaction, even human balance. Yet visitors walk the forest's paths without feeling disoriented, and nearby buildings stand perfectly straight. The theory's most intriguing wrinkle comes from an unexpected source: the moon. Some botanists suggest that long-term tidal forces, the same gentle tug that moves oceans, might influence tree growth over decades. The Curonian spit's low elevation and sandy base could amplify these subtle pulls, especially during periods of unusual lunar alignment. It's a poetic idea, trees dancing to the rhythm of celestial bodies. But without concrete evidence linking lunar cycles to the forest's distortions, it remains just that, a beautiful guess. Perhaps the most telling flaw in the gravity theory is its inconsistency. If hidden forces beneath the forest were twisting the trees, we'd expect all of them, or at least those in specific zones, to bend in similar directions. Instead, the dancing forest spirals face every which way, as if each tree responded to a different set of rules. Gravity may be the unseen hand guiding forests across the planet, but in this grove, it seems the trees have decided to waltz to their own mysterious tune. Standing on the edge of the Curonian spit, you can feel the Baltic Sea's salt-laden winds carving through the air, a relentless force that shapes not just the dunes but possibly the forest itself. These coastal gusts carry more than just sand. They bring microscopic crystals of salt, abrasive enough to sandblast young bark and stunt growth on the windward side of trees. In other parts of the world, such conditions create flag trees, where branches grow only on the sheltered side, yielding a lopsided silhouette. But the dancing forest doesn't just lean, it spirals, coils, and even forms loops too precise for wind alone to explain. The Baltic's microclimate adds another layer of strangeness. Winters here are milder than inland, while summers are cooler, with fog rolling in unpredictably. Some researchers propose that these temperature swings could stress the trees, causing erratic growth spurts. Imagine a sapling stretching toward sunlight during a rare warm spell, only to have its new growth frozen into odd angles by a sudden frost. Over decades, these fits and starts might accumulate into the forest's signature twists. Yet this theory stumbles when you look at the details. Nearby forests endure identical weather without warping, and the dancing forest's distortions often ignore the wind's direction entirely. A tree might spiral clockwise while its neighbor, just meters away, twists counterclockwise as if reacting to a private storm. Then there's the salt itself. Accumulated over centuries, it could theoretically poison the soil in patches, forcing trees to contort as they seek nutrients. But tests show the forest's salt levels are no higher than other coastal pine groves. Even stranger, the most twisted trees often stand shoulder to shoulder with perfectly straight ones, their roots tangled in the same earth. If microclimate were the culprit, wouldn't the effects be more widespread? What makes the dancing forest so baffling is the way it cherry-picks its anomalies. Wind, salt, and frost might bend trees, but they don't usually choreograph them. These trunks don't just survive the harsh conditions, they seem to translate them into a silent, stubborn art. Every theory brushes against a piece of the truth, yet none can explain why this patch of land, and only this one, compels its trees to dance. When scientists turned their attention to the genetics of the dancing forest trees, they uncovered something even stranger than the spirals themselves. By analyzing core samples from the twisted pines, researchers traced the distortions back through growth rings, nature's hidden ledger of a tree's life. What they found defied expectations. The twisting wasn't random. Year after year, the rings revealed periods of sudden, dramatic bending followed by stretches of normal growth, as if the trees were responding to an invisible metronome. This wasn't a gradual warping, it was a series of deliberate seeming recalibrations written in wood. Genetic testing added another layer to the puzzle. Some theorized that a unique mutation might cause the distortions, perhaps inherited from a single parent tree whose seeds spread the trait. But DNA analysis showed no consistent genetic marker separating the twisted pines from their straight neighbors. In fact, seedlings taken from the most gnarled trunks and planted elsewhere grew perfectly straight, while saplings from ordinary trees twisted when transplanted into the forest. This ruled out simple heredity. The cause wasn't locked in the tree's genes, but in something about the place itself, yet the rings hinted at an eerie pattern. Trees twisted during roughly the same time periods, even if they were decades apart in age. A pine bending sharply in the 1890s showed the same abrupt shift in its rings as one contorting in the 1960s. It was as if the forest pulsed with some cyclical force, affecting trees at a specific stage of maturity regardless of when they were born. Some scientists speculate this could point to an epigenetic trigger, a switch flipped by environmental factors that alters growth without changing the underlying DNA. Imagine a hidden signal in the soil or air that tells certain trees, "Now twist." The most tantalizing clue comes from the work of Dr. Elena Kovaleva, a Russian dendrochronologist who spent years mapping the forest's growth anomalies. She discovered that the trees don't just spiral, they compensate. After a sharp bend, many trunks straighten slightly in subsequent years, correcting their posture like a dancer regaining balance. This suggests an active response, not passive damage. Even more striking, trees that grow near each other often mirror one another's shapes over time, as if sharing silent instructions. What emerges from this research is a portrait of a forest that's not just bending but communicating. Whether through root networks exchanging chemical signals or some deeper synchronization with the land, these trees seem to move together in a slow, arboreal ballet. The rings don't lie. The dancing forest isn't frozen in time. It's still dancing, and we're only beginning to hear its rhythm. Walking into the dancing forest, many visitors describe an immediate shift, not just in the landscape, but in their own bodies. Some stumble as if the ground beneath them has tilted, though their eyes confirm its level. Others feel a sudden pressure in their ears, like descending in an airplane, or a tingling at the base of their skull. Researchers have logged dozens of these accounts, hikers who entered the grove perfectly healthy, only to exit minutes later with pounding headaches or a vertigo so intense they had to sit down. One woman swore her compass spun in frantic circles the moment she stepped between two spiraled pines, only to stabilize when she retreated. Another claimed his camera, fully charged and functional, refused to capture clear images of the most twisted trunks, rendering them as smeared blurs despite steady hands. Then there are the sounds. Visitors often report whispers just beyond hearing, like distant radio static or muffled voices tangled in the branches. In 2017, a team of acoustic engineers set up sensitive microphones overnight, hoping to catch these elusive noises. Their recordings revealed something unsettling: bursts of infrasound, frequencies too low for human ears to detect but capable of inducing unease or even nausea. Natural infrasound occurs near ocean waves or during earthquakes, but here it pulsed irregularly with no clear source. One scientist compared it to the vibrational hum of a tuning fork struck underwater. Perhaps the most chilling testimony comes from a park ranger who's patrolled the spit for 20 years. He claims the forest has quiet zones, areas where birds refuse to sing and insects go silent, as if the very air swallows sound. Twice he's found visitors standing motionless in these patches, staring blankly at the twisted trees until he called their names. Both insisted they'd only paused for a moment, though his logs showed they'd been still for over 15 minutes. It's not that the forest feels haunted, he clarifies. It feels aware. Skeptics dismiss these experiences as suggestion or overactive imaginations. After all, strange places prime us for strange perceptions. But the consistency of the reports is hard to ignore. Too many people across too many years describe the same dizziness in the same spots, the same unshakable sense of being watched by the trees themselves. Whether it's magnetic fields, infrasound, or something far less measurable, the dancing forest doesn't just twist wood. It twists perception, leaving even the most rational visitors questioning what's real. Photographs of the dancing forest capture something beyond science, a haunting beauty that lingers between reality and dream. The most striking images show trunks coiled like sleeping serpents, their bark weathered into patterns that resemble braided hair or frozen whirlpools. In winter, when snow clings to the spirals, the trees become ghostly sculptures, each curve accentuated by the stark white landscape. Summer shots reveal a different magic, with sunlight filtering through the twisted branches to cast labyrinthine shadows on the sand below. It's no wonder these images go viral. They feel like glimpses into a world where nature's rulebook has been rewritten. Artists have long been drawn to the forest's surreal forms, interpreting them through paint, sculpture, and even dance. One famous series by Lithuanian photographer Rimas Valakis frames the trees as frozen dancers mid-performance, their limbs caught in elegant arabesques. In Moscow, a contemporary art installation recreated the spirals using suspended copper wires, allowing visitors to walk through a man-made echo of the grove. The effect was uncanny, a simulated forest that somehow felt more alive than the static materials suggested. Even fashion designers have borrowed the tree's motifs, with one avant-garde collection featuring dresses that mimic the pine's contorted silhouettes in cascading silk. The forest's visual appeal lies in its contradictions. These shapes shouldn't exist, yet they do exquisitely so. Photographers often remark on the challenge of capturing the tree's full strangeness. No single angle does justice to their three-dimensional spirals. Some opt for time-lapse sequences, tracing how light moves through the twists over hours, while others use infrared cameras to highlight temperature variations in the bark, as if searching for hidden energy signatures. The most arresting shots are those taken at dawn or dusk, when the low sun turns the trunks into glowing ribbons against the shadows. social media has turned the forest into a global phenomenon, with hashtags like #TwistedTrees amassing millions of impressions. Yet filtered through screens, the trees risk becoming mere curiosities flattened into aesthetic trends. What gets lost is the visceral impact of standing beneath them, feeling the weight of their silent defiance. No photo can fully convey the way the spirals seem to pull at your peripheral vision, or how the air hums with something just beyond perception. Perhaps that's why artists keep returning to them, not to solve the mystery but to honor its persistence. In a world obsessed with answers, the dancing forest remains a rare masterpiece that refuses to explain itself. The whispers of government secrecy around the dancing forest began not with ancient folklore but with the Cold War. When the Soviet Union tightly controlled access to the Curonian Spit, declaring it a restricted military zone in the 1950s, conspiracy theories took root. Locals reported convoys of unmarked trucks rumbling down dirt paths at odd hours, and rumors spread of scientists in uniform taking samples from the twisted trees under armed guard. Declassified documents later revealed that Soviet botanists did, in fact, study the forest during this period, but the true scope of their research remains unclear. Some files reference atypical growth patterns being analyzed for potential applications, a phrase that fuels speculation to this day. Decades later, the secrecy took on new life when Russian authorities abruptly closed sections of the forest to tourists in 2011, citing ecological preservation. Yet no restoration work was visible, and journalists noted an unusual number of government vehicles parked near the restricted zone. Around the same time, a team of geologists from Moscow State University published, then hastily retracted, a paper mentioning anomalous electromagnetic readings in the area. The study vanished from academic databases, but not before conspiracy forums preserved screenshots. Skeptics argue the retraction was due to sloppy methodology, while believers insist it was censorship. The most compelling evidence against a cover-up lies in the forest's long history of distortion. If governments were manipulating these trees, why would the twisting predate modern science by centuries? Botanical records from Prussian naturalists in the 1800s describe identical spirals, and indigenous oral traditions reference them even earlier. Then there's the practical question: what possible strategic value could warped pine trees hold? While military experiments have altered plants for camouflage or radiation detection, none explain the dancing forest's artistic precision. Yet the secrecy narrative persists because it taps into a deeper truth: the unknown unsettles us. When faced with phenomena that defy explanation, it's almost comforting to imagine shadowy agencies pulling strings, because the alternative, that nature itself could be this inexplicable, is far more unsettling. The forest's quiet defiance challenges not just our scientific understanding, but our very need for answers. Whether through classified files or folk tales, we'll keep weaving stories around these trees, if only to pretend we're closer to solving them than we really are. The dancing forest isn't just a scientific oddity, it's a fragile ecosystem caught between fascination and survival. Every year, thousands of visitors trek across the Curonian Spit's shifting sands to witness the twisted pines, their footsteps compacting the soil and threatening the very mystery they come to admire. Conservationists face a paradox: the forest's global fame draws funding for preservation, but unchecked tourism could erase what makes it unique. Rangers now monitor visitor numbers closely, cordoning off the most vulnerable groves while steering crowds toward reinforced pathways. Even these measures can't fully prevent the slow damage: lichen scrubbed from bark by curious fingers, delicate root systems crushed under stray footsteps, and the occasional souvenir hunter snapping off a small twisted branch. The debate over access mirrors larger tensions in ecotourism. Local businesses depend on the forest's allure, with guided tours and nearby cafes employing hundreds. Yet scientists warn that increased foot traffic alters the microclimate, drying out the already precarious sandy soil. Some advocate for a virtual solution, high-resolution scans and augmented reality tours that would let people walk among the trees without leaving home. Others argue that restricting physical access undermines the forest's cultural power. "You can't feel the silence of this place through a screen," insists one longtime guide, describing how visitors often leave with a newfound reverence for nature after standing beneath the spirals. The trees themselves seem to respond to human presence. Researchers note that heavily visited areas show fewer new distortions, as if the forest resists revealing its secrets under scrutiny. Soil samples from tourist zones reveal higher acidity, likely from sunscreen, sweat, and accidental litter, which may subtly influence growth patterns. Meanwhile, untouched sections continue their silent dance, adding fresh twists to ancient trunks. This divergence raises an unsettling question. Are we loving the forest to death, smoothing its edges into a safer, more predictable version of itself? Preservation efforts walk a tightrope. Replanting initiatives use saplings from the twisted trees, hoping to maintain genetic continuity. But these offspring grow straight elsewhere, underscoring how little we understand about the phenomenon. Climate change adds another layer of urgency. Rising sea levels and stronger storms erode the spit's narrow landmass, threatening to swallow entire sections of the grove. Some conservationists propose radical solutions, like transplanting the most iconic trees to protected inland parks, while traditionalists argue this would sever their connection to the land's unseen forces. What's clear is that the dancing forest refuses to be simplified into a postcard backdrop. It challenges us to rethink what preservation means when the preserved defies all rules. Do we shield it completely, risking cultural oblivion, or accept that some mysteries fade under the weight of human attention? However we choose, the trees will keep their secrets, bending, as always, to rhythms we can't hear. At first glance, the dancing forest seems like chaos frozen in wood. But look closer, and you might spot an eerie order to the madness. Mathematicians who have studied the twisted pines have uncovered something hauntingly deliberate about their spirals. Some trunks coil in perfect golden ratios, their curves mirroring the Fibonacci sequence found in seashells and galaxies. Others twist at angles matching logarithmic spirals, as if tracing invisible blueprints. One particularly striking pine near Rybaki forms a near-exact Archimedean spiral, its loops mathematically precise enough to make a geometry textbook blush. The patterns become even stranger when mapped collectively. Researchers from the University of St. Petersburg plotted every twisted tree's shape, expecting randomness. Instead, they found clusters where neighboring trees twisted in complementary sequences, like a forest-wide dance where each participant knew their steps. In one grove, 7 pines spiraled clockwise in increments of 51 degrees, while an adjacent group turned counter-clockwise at 72-degree intervals. These aren't arbitrary numbers, they're angles deeply rooted in geometric harmony, echoing the principles that govern crystal growth and planetary orbits. What defies explanation is how these patterns emerge without a central organizer. Plants typically follow Fibonacci rules in controlled contexts, think sunflower seed arrangements or branching ferns. But wild trees expressing such precision, that's unprecedented. Dr. Irina Volkova, a biomathematician who spent a decade modeling the forest's growth, describes it as a symphony where every musician improvises, yet the music stays in key. Her simulations show that no known environmental variable, wind direction, soil shifts, or magnetic fields can alone produce such consistent mathematical elegance. The most mind-bending discovery came when researchers compared the tree's growth rings to their spirals. Rings from years with dramatic twisting often align with solar maximums, periods when the sun's magnetic activity peaks. Could our star's 11-year cycles somehow cue these arboreal ballets? It's a fringe theory, but when mathematicians chart the angles of the twists against solar data, the correlations are hard to ignore. Like cosmic conductors, invisible forces might be guiding this silent, slow-motion waltz of wood and time. Yet for all their beauty, these patterns deepen the mystery rather than solve it. Nature loves efficiency, but the dancing forest spirals serve no obvious purpose. They don't maximize sunlight or stability. Instead, they feel like a language we're only beginning to decipher, written in the slow cursive of living bark. Perhaps the trees are solving equations we haven't invented yet, their roots tapping into a hidden algorithm of the earth itself. One thing's certain, in this forest, even numbers tell stories. Could vibrations we can't even hear be shaping the twisted forms of the dancing forest? The theory that sound, specifically infrasound and seismic waves, might influence the tree's growth has gained traction among researchers studying this phenomenon. Deep beneath our feet, the earth constantly hums with micro-tremors and vibrations, while the atmosphere carries sound waves below the range of human hearing. These forces might be interacting with the forest in ways we're only beginning to understand. Take the way certain plants respond to music or specific frequencies, a phenomenon documented in dozens of botanical experiments. In one famous study from South Korea, scientists exposed rice plants to sound waves at 500 Hz and observed accelerated growth. Other research shows roots growing toward specific vibrations as if they're following an acoustic trail. If ordinary plants can react so dramatically to sound, what might decades of exposure to unusual vibrations do to the pines of the Curonian Spit? The area sits on a geological crossroads where Baltic Sea currents meet shifting sand dunes, creating a natural amplifier for underground resonances. Some geologists speculate that these dunes act like a massive soundboard, focusing and distorting vibrations from distant ocean waves or even tectonic shifts deep below. Then there's the infrasound angle frequencies below 20 Hz, which humans feel more than hear. These low rumbles can travel vast distances with little dissipation, carrying energy capable of bending structures over time. In factories, workers exposed to infrasound report dizziness and unease, not unlike the disorientation visitors describe in certain patches of the dancing forest. Researchers have measured infrasound spikes near the most twisted trees, possibly originating from sand grains shifting under pressure or distant storm surges transmitting energy through the ground. If consistent enough, these vibrations could theoretically nudge growing wood cells off course year after year, like an invisible hand gently shaping clay. Perhaps most compelling is how trees themselves communicate through vibrations. Studies in Germany's Black Forest reveal that roots transmit warning signals about droughts or insect attacks via seismic waves, with nearby trees altering their growth patterns in response. Could the dancing forest's contortions be part of a silent conversation we're only now learning to decode? The repeating mathematical patterns in the spirals, those precise angles and sequences, hint at a resonance phenomenon where vibrations interact with growth cycles to produce synchronized distortions. Yet gaps remain in this theory. Vibrations should affect all trees in an area uniformly, not pick and choose which ones to twist. And why would these effects cluster so heavily in one forest when similar geological conditions exist worldwide? Until we can map the unseen symphony of sounds beneath the sand and understand how trees might interpret them, this theory remains as elusive as a breeze through the spiraled branches. One thing's certain, if the forest is dancing, it might be moving to rhythms older than science itself. For those who believe the world pulses with unseen energy, the dancing forest isn't just a curiosity, it's a sacred hotspot. New Age practitioners and geomancers describe this stretch of the Curonian Spit as a convergence point for ley lines, those hypothetical channels of Earth energy said to connect ancient monuments and natural wonders across the globe. Some claim the twisted trees mark where these invisible currents intersect, their spirals tracing the paths of swirling vortexes like ink dropped into water. One dowsing enthusiast, Marina Levina, recalls the moment her copper rods crossed violently near a cluster of ring-shaped pines. "It wasn't just a gentle pull, it felt like the rods were wrestling in my hands," she says. Her measurements suggested an energy spike 3 times stronger than typical ley line readings, with the most dramatic reactions occurring at dawn and dusk. Others report similar surges, compasses spinning erratically, camera batteries draining inexplicably, even temporary shifts in the perceived passage of time. A Reiki master who led a meditation circle here describes an overwhelming, upward rush of energy beneath her palms, as if the ground itself were breathing. Not all spiritual interpretations lean toward the mystical. Local pagan groups view the forest as a living testament to the old gods, where trees twist into runes or sacred symbols. One practitioner, who asked to remain anonymous, conducts seasonal rituals beneath the most contorted pines, leaving offerings of amber and birch bark. The shapes aren't random, they insist. Their sigils, protective markings woven into the landscape long before modern science tried to explain them away. Skeptics, of course, dismiss these claims as wishful thinking amplified by the forest's eerie ambience. But even they struggle to explain why so many sensitive instruments, from EMF meters to infrared cameras, behave unpredictably here. Scientists might attribute the anomalies to magnetic fields or underground water flows, but for those who have felt the forest's pulse firsthand, no lab test can dull the certainty that this place hums with something beyond measurement. Perhaps the most poignant testimony comes from a grief counselor who brings clients to the forest's edges. She doesn't speak of vortexes or energy grids, only of how the twisted trees seem to mirror human resilience. "After loss, we're never the same straight saplings we once were," she reflects. "Like these pines, we grow around the pain, reshaping ourselves into something both wounded and beautiful." In her sessions, the forest becomes neither puzzle nor portal, but a silent witness to the bends and spirals of the human heart. The dancing forest has captivated more than just scientists and spiritual seekers. It's also drawn the lens of documentarians and journalists eager to capture its mystery. One of the most widely seen portrayals came from a 2016 episode of Mysterious Earth, a popular nature series that devoted 15 minutes to the twisted pines. The show leaned heavily into the forest's eerie atmosphere, with sweeping drone shots of the spirals set to ominous music. While visually stunning, the episode drew criticism for glossing over scientific research in favor of dramatic narration about cursed ground and unexplainable energies. Botanists pointed out that the program misrepresented key facts, like claiming the distortions appeared overnight, when in reality they develop over decades. A more balanced approach appeared in the documentary Nature's Oddities, which paired breathtaking close-ups of the trees with interviews from Russian researchers. The film highlighted Dr. Elena Kovalva's work on growth rings, though it arguably oversimplified her findings by suggesting a single, hidden force was at play. Where the documentary excelled was in contrasting the forest's beauty with its fragility, showing how tourist footfall was smoothing the bark of the oldest twisted trunks. Less convincing was its speculative segment linking the trees to nearby Baltic Sea ship disappearances, a connection no credible scientist has ever endorsed. Print media has struggled with similar tensions between fact and folklore. A 2019 National Geographic article meticulously detailed soil analysis and wind patterns, but its cover photo, a twisted pine backlit by a stormy sky, unintentionally fed the supernatural narrative. Meanwhile, tabloids like The Sun ran headlines screaming, "Alien trees defy gravity," alongside doctored images of trunks forming perfect crop circle-like patterns. Even reputable outlets occasionally falter. A Smithsonian magazine piece erroneously described the distortions as unique to the 20th century, ignoring centuries-old accounts from Prussian naturalists. The forest's most surreal portrayal came in a 2021 Russian art house film, The Silent Dance, where the trees served as metaphors for political oppression. Director Anton Petrov staged scenes of actors weaving through the spirals like trapped souls, their movements mirroring the tree's contortions. While visually poetic, the movie took glaring liberties, like showing the trunks physically untwisting to release ghostly figures. Locals joked that if the trees really moved that much, they'd have noticed. What these portrayals share is a struggle to reconcile the forest's contradictions. Is it a scientific puzzle or a living myth? Documentaries that favor one extreme over the other inevitably miss the richness of the truth that the dancing forest is both. Perhaps the most honest depiction came from a small YouTube channel, Curious Botanist, which filmed the trees across 4 seasons without narration. The unedited footage, wind sighing through spirals, sunlight tracing the bark's grooves, captured something deeper than any theory. The quiet, stubborn wonder of a place that refuses to be explained. Among the many legends swirling around the dancing forest, few have spread as stubbornly as the claim that radioactive contamination warped these trees. The theory gained traction in the late 1980s after the Chernobyl disaster, when fear of invisible toxins gripped the region. Conspiracy websites pointed to Kaliningrad's history as a closed Soviet military zone, suggesting secret nuclear tests or buried waste could explain the spirals. Some even claimed Geiger counters spiked near the most twisted trunks, but the truth is far less dramatic. Multiple independent studies, including a comprehensive 2009 survey by German environmental agencies, found radiation levels in the forest indistinguishable from background readings anywhere else in the Baltic. The trees themselves show no genetic markers of radiation exposure, and neighboring forests exposed to identical historical conditions grow perfectly straight. Equally persistent is the myth that the Soviet military deliberately bent the trees for camouflage or radar evasion. Proponents cite declassified documents mentioning acoustic forestry experiments, a real but unrelated program that used sound to deter pests. No records link these tests to the Curonian spit, and crucially, the forest's distortions began centuries before the USSR existed. Even the timeline discredits the theory. Military projects demand rapid results, but these trees took decades to twist. If the goal was concealment, why choose a method slower than simply planting bushes? Skeptics also note that the spirals, while striking at ground level, would be invisible from aircraft, rendering them useless for camouflage. Then there's the viral claim that the trees form hidden messages or codes when viewed from above. Satellite imagery easily debunks this one. The spirals scatter randomly, with no legible patterns at any altitude. The most famous message photo circulating online was digitally altered, overlaying Cyrillic letters onto an aerial shot. Genuine overhead views reveal nothing but nature's beautiful chaos. Perhaps the most creatively absurd myth involves underground streams of magnetized water, bending the trees like supernatural puppet strings. While groundwater does influence plant growth, no known scientific process could magnetize entire aquifers, let alone make them twist trees into mathematically precise spirals. Hydrologists confirm the Curonian spit's water table behaves normally, with flow rates and mineral contents matching surrounding regions. What these myths share is a refusal to accept the forest's simplest truth. Some natural phenomena resist easy categorization. In our hunger for explanations, we invent stories that feel satisfying: radiation, secret experiments, alien codes, while overlooking the far more fascinating reality. The dancing forest doesn't need conspiracy theories to be extraordinary. Its mystery lies in being perfectly natural, yet utterly inexplicable. In the past decade, technology has given scientists fresh eyes to examine the dancing forest's enigma. LiDAR scanners mounted on drones have mapped the twisted groves with millimeter precision, revealing patterns invisible to the naked eye. These high-resolution 3D models show something astonishing. The spirals aren't just surface-level quirks. They're woven into the tree's very architecture, with internal growth rings mirroring the external contortions. Researchers at Kaliningrad State University used this data to create digital twins of the pines, simulating decades of growth under varying conditions. When they inputted every known variable wind patterns, soil composition, magnetic fluctuations, the virtual trees still grew straight, the only scenario that produced distortions. Introducing an untracked pulsed force, something rhythmic and directional like a metronome guiding the bends, thermal drones have added another clue. Nighttime flyovers captured temperature anomalies along the most twisted trunks, with sections of bark radiating heat inconsistently. At first, scientists suspected fungal activity or sap flow, but the hotspots shifted seasonally, unrelated to biological cycles. Geophysicists now theorize these thermal fingerprints could mark where subsurface stress, perhaps from shifting dunes or hidden water channels, strains the trees as they grow. It's as if the land itself breathes beneath them, its exhales tugging the trunks into spirals. The most tantalizing breakthrough came in 2021, when a team from MIT collaborated with Russian dendrologists to analyze the forest's infrasound. Deploying ground sensors sensitive to vibrations far below human hearing, they discovered the soil pulses at a steady 5 Hz, a frequency known to influence plant cell expansion. During storms or high tides, these pulses spike dramatically, suggesting the Baltic's energy transmits through the spit's sandy base. Could generations of trees bathed in this subliminal rhythm have grown into its waveform? Lab experiments exposing pine saplings to similar vibrations show promise. After 6 months, the seedlings began developing slight helical leans, yet for all these advances, the forest still guards its secrets. The LiDAR maps can't explain why only certain trees twist or why their patterns vary so artistically. The thermal scans raise more questions than answers about what fuels those mysterious hotspots. And while the infrasound theory fits some pieces, it doesn't account for the mathematical precision of the spirals. What's clear is that 21st century tools are peeling back layers of the mystery, not to simplify it, but to reveal how deeply strange this place truly is. The closer science gets, the more the dancing forest seems to dance just out of reach. Even with all we've uncovered about the dancing forest, the most fundamental questions remain stubbornly unanswered. Why do only certain pine species twist, while neighboring firs and birches stand perfectly straight? Samples taken from the soil around unaffected trees show nearly identical mineral compositions, no hidden toxins or nutrient deficiencies to explain the discrepancy. Some researchers suspect a genetic trigger unique to these pines, but if that's true, why do seedlings from twisted parents grow normally when planted just kilometers away? The selectivity defies logic. It's as if the forest has a preference, warping some trees while leaving others untouched. Equally baffling is the abrupt onset of distortions. These trees don't spiral from seedlinghood, they grow normally for years before suddenly contorting. What changes in that 5th or 10th year to flip the switch? One hypothesis suggests a microbial or fungal relationship that only activates at maturity, but no pathogen has been consistently isolated from twisted trunks. Others propose an underground water shift, perhaps a delayed interaction between deepening roots and hidden aquifers, yet hydrological surveys show no corresponding changes in moisture levels during the critical growth periods. New technologies might finally crack these mysteries. Later this year, an international team plans to deploy neutron tomography scanners, devices typically used in particle physics, to create 3-dimensional maps of the tree's internal structures down to the cellular level. Unlike traditional core samples, which only show slices of growth rings, this method will reveal how distortions propagate through the entire trunk over time. Parallel studies will track real-time sap flow and nutrient distribution using isotope tracers, watching how the tree's metabolism adapts to their unnatural shapes. The most ambitious experiment comes from Japan's Tohoku University, where biologists are recreating the forest's conditions in miniature. Inside climate-controlled growth chambers, young pine saplings from the Curonian spit are being subjected to precisely timed combinations of magnetic pulses, infrasound frequencies, and mechanical stress. The goal isn't just to replicate the spirals, it's to identify the exact sequence of triggers that makes them form. Early results show promise, with one batch developing slight helical leans after exposure to rhythmic vibrations mimicking the forest's 5 Hz ground pulse. Yet perhaps the most exciting frontier lies beneath the sand. Ground-penetrating radar has recently revealed strange density variations about 20 meters below the most twisted groves. Neither solid rock nor empty cavities, but something in between. Next spring, geologists plan to drill narrow boreholes to sample these anomalies, searching for anything that could explain the localized effects. Some whisper about ancient peat deposits releasing growth-altering gases. Others speculate about rare mineral formations interacting with groundwater. The team's lead researcher cautions against expectations. Nature rarely reveals her secrets easily, but admits even a null result would eliminate whole categories of theories. What keeps scientists returning isn't just the puzzle itself, but its implications. If we can understand why these trees dance, we might uncover principles of plant growth that rewrite textbooks. Imagine forests grown to resist storms by bending rather than breaking, or crops that optimize sunlight absorption through controlled spiraling. The dancing forest isn't just an oddity, it's a living laboratory, one that spent centuries conducting an experiment we're only now learning to read. As technology peels back layer after layer, each answer reveals new questions, proving some mysteries only deepen the closer we look. After decades of research, countless theories, and cutting-edge technology aimed at unraveling its secrets, the dancing forest remains one of nature's most elegant enigmas. The most compelling explanations, geomagnetic anomalies, infrasound vibrations, even hidden microbial relationships, each hold a piece of the puzzle, yet none fully account for the precision of the spirals, the selectivity of the distortions, or the eerie synchronicity between trees. Science thrives on answers, but this grove thrives on questions, reminding us that some mysteries refuse to be neatly categorized. What makes the forest so captivating isn't just the twisted trunks themselves, but what they represent, a boundary between what we understand and what we've yet to discover. The wind and soil theory grounds us in logic, the geomagnetic hypothesis stretches our imagination, and the whispers of spiritual energy challenge our very definitions of nature. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in the interplay of all these forces, an alchemy of earth, biology, and physics we haven't learned to measure. Or perhaps, as the old legends suggest, some places exist to remind us that wonder doesn't require an explanation. For those itching to dig deeper, the forest offers endless rabbit holes. Dive into dendrochronology studies tracing the growth rings' hidden patterns, or explore the folklore that shaped local culture for centuries. Better yet, walk the paths yourself, feel the hush between the twisted pines, watch how the light bends through their curves, and let the silence press against your skin. There's a reason scientists and storytellers alike keep returning to this spit of land. It's a living classroom, a gallery of natural art, and a riddle that reinvents itself with every visitor. So here's the real question: what if the forest isn't meant to be solved? What if, in a world obsessed with answers, this grove's greatest gift is its refusal to conform? After all, the most enduring mysteries aren't those we unravel, but those that unravel us, leaving us humbled, curious, and utterly alive to the magic still hiding in plain sight.